Fame is often noted for its potential to inflate one's ego. Over the years as a writer, you've certainly established a fair bit of celebrity for yourself. Did you find that the initial onset of your fame altered your sense of self/ego at all, even temporarily? If so, how? Do you credit your background in meditation for helping you keep level-headed? I certainly don't think of myself as famous, although obviously some number of people know who I am, and I sometimes get recognized in public. I actually occupy a kind of uncanny valley with respect to fame. So think of what the experience of a genuinely famous person is like. A real famous person goes into public knowing that he or she will be recognized. There's no doubt of that, right? So take the extreme example. You've got someone like Tom Cruise. So you have a movie star. When he or she goes into public, there's no question about whether or not they'll be recognized. And so they begin every encounter with another person on the assumption that that person recognizes them. That's got to be weird, but there's really no basis for surprise when the person says, hey, I love your work, or when that person proves that he or she has recognized the famous person. Now, I don't live in that space at all. I mean, the only place where I have that experience would be at the ultimate case would be if I went to an atheist conference where every attendee at the conference would know who I am. Then I have the normal experience of being a famous person where I walk out into the lobby and people recognize me and they come up and talk to me and there's no basis for surprise. But my experience of, quote, fame is to know that most people have no idea who I am. And it's a perfectly rational assumption to assume that I can walk into a restaurant or walk into a room and be perfectly anonymous. And yet I have the experience of people with some regularity coming up and introducing themselves, having recognized me. And I always find this surprising. And most of these encounters are totally pleasant. In fact, no one has ever come up to say anything unpleasant. There's nobody who's come up who has then proved to be anything other than a real fan who has something positive to say about my work. So this leads me to believe, in fact, know, that there are many people who are recognizing me who hate my work, right, and are simply not saying anything. And that's a little weird. So again, there's like a kind of uncanny valley here where I am walking around assuming that I'm not at all famous, because in the spectrum of things, I'm barely recognizable. And yet I continually get recognized and continually get surprised that this person knew who I was. And this can often be weird because it can happen long after an encounter has started. So I could be having dinner and ordering food from the waiter, and only at the end of the meal, after many minutes of interaction with this person, will the person then say, oh, and by the way, I really love your work, right? And then I'm left in the very weird position of wondering whether or not, and this is a feature of my mind that I would not have known existed. It makes me wonder whether or not I conducted myself in that exchange the way I would have wanted to had I known I was Sam Harris the writer, or Sam Harris the public person for this person. And that's psychologically interesting to me. The fact that if somebody knows who I am, I'm slightly concerned to protect that person's view of me as a writer or a thinker or a public person in a way that I'm not if it's an anonymous encounter and they're just meeting me. I don't know what to make of that. So my experience of, quote, fame is a weird one. I just get surprised by it and don't really know what to make of those experiences. Another component, which is purely a positive one, is that insofar as other people know who I am, it gives me a kind of agency to reach out and connect with people whose work I value and with whom I want to have a conversation. So it's useful for me to have done something publicly that people recognize if I want to start a conversation with other people playing similar games. That part of it's been purely positive. But as to whether or not it's inflated my ego, I can't say that it has. I think, if anything, moving in circles with other people who are accomplishing a lot, for instance, going to a conference that's just filled with smart, successful people, even ones who are only in the audience, right, who are not speaking at the conference, a place like TED being a classic example, that doesn't tend to inflate one's ego, or at least it doesn't inflate mine. It makes me worry that I'm not doing enough in most cases. So making a successful connection with the world, which is one cause of fame, doing something that other people want to pay attention to, that has, if anything, made my ego healthier in the sense that it's just reduced a certain kind of concern. I now know that if I have something that I want to say, I will have an opportunity to say it in one form or another, whether that's writing or podcasting or giving a public talk or being interviewed by a journalist. These opportunities keep coming up, and many of them I can even manufacture myself now. That, for me, ended a certain kind of isolation and frustration that was a very good thing to end. For a few years there, I was someone who had a lot of ideas and didn't have anything to do with them. That was frustrating. So if you're in that situation, I know what that's like. The remedy is to keep putting your stuff out there until people notice it. And the opportunities to do that are only increasing.